Good evening, everyone. My name is Ian Morrison, Chair of the Cowichan Valley Regional District. I'd like to just begin by acknowledging that this meeting is taking place in the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people. I'd like to remind everyone around the table and in the gallery to please turn your cell phones to silent or off. And And just like to note that, and want to thank the board members for their diligence today. For those of you in the audience, we've been hard at it since 11:30 today, so thank you all for your attendance and work. And we will turn our attention to the agenda for today. I've been made aware of 2 items to add to the closed session of the agenda. We have CSNB1, appointments to the Kerry Park Rec Center, and CSNB2, employee relations. Are there any other items that need to be added to our agenda today? Seeing none, motion to approve is amended, moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Marsh. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Minutes of our meeting of December 12th. Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Sebring. Any discussion on that item? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Mr. Barry, any business arising?
No business arising, Mr. Chair.
Now we come to the public input period. The procedure policy is on the screen for everyone to see. Now I would like to invite anyone that would like to provide input to the board on matters on the agenda. Please come forward.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. I've been watching you since 11:30, and it's been a rough day. It's even going to get rougher, I think, on SR2 because the regional services grant and aids are coming up, and the rules and regulations. And if you take $150,000 and throw it on the floor, and you watch 15 directors go after it, this morning was mild to what it is when you get in on the grant and aids. So when you review the regulations and that, I think it would be good that you look them over really carefully, and that when you do come up with your rules, that you really stick to your rules and make the system fair for everyone. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else would like to provide some input to the board today? Please come forward to the lectern.
Thank you. My understanding is that this evening we'll be addressing the estuary and, sorry, I'm just suddenly at a loss for words, but I'd like to speak to that. So I've lived on Vancouver Island for 38 years, and 28 of those years have been on the edge of the estuary here. The other place that I lived was Campbell River. So during the course of my lifetime, I've seen huge change in both of these communities. When I grew up in Campbell River, it was a logging town, there was mining there was a pulp mill, it was a resource-based town. And you could see all along the water industrial development. So along the edge of the Campbell River, which was an incredibly productive salmon river, there were sawmills, there was industrial development all up and down. It was asphalted both sides. And slowly over time, those things stopped functioning. They basically came to the end of their life. The pulp mill shut down. Eventually the sawmills on the edge of the river shut down. And things would have gone on in those same spaces as usual, some other industrial thing coming into those places, except Walmart wanted to move in. And at that point, the people of Campbell River decided, whoa, we need to do something different. There was a big fight. And over time, they eventually came to a new vision. And that new vision was one of returning the river to what it had been. So they decided that they would pull up the asphalt, and they did. They decided they would put money into it, and they started enhancing the salmon streams around that area. There are still some industrial things that happen on the edge of the water that are appropriate. For example, they have a seaplane port there. There are a few other things as well. But I've noticed over the last 30 years since I've left Campbell River that the whole waterfront has been improved and developed. There used to be a sewage facility right at the beginning of town. Excuse the wording, but the town folk used to call it the shit pit, and that's what it smelled like. Somebody had the idea that that was a good idea. Slowly over time, that's changed. So as I've watched what's happened in Cowichan Bay for the last 28 years, I've seen how the bay has shifted and changed. New people have come. There's a new sensibility about the bay altogether. Some of the industrial things that have happened have been shut down.
You've got about 15 seconds.
Thank you. I just want to say that I went there recently just to take a look at what was happening. What I found were tons of creosote logs. I found asphalt going into the edge of the bay. I found what looked like a scrap heap. And I've seen that for years now. 2 years ago, it was a garbage about 20 feet high. If that's the way it's going to be, can't we think of something better to do in that space? And how are we going to monitor what is done in that space? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to provide input to the board today? Please come forward.
Good evening, everyone. Appreciate your hard work, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Could I ask you to just point the mic closer towards you so that the
Sure.
people at home can hear you? Thank you.
How's that? Better? Rezoning for heavy industry in the middle of a sensitive estuary in 2019 doesn't make any sense. I know it's about jobs. Undoubtedly, the work is important, and I understand that no one wants to lose their employment. But why does steel manufacturing have to continue in such an unsuitable location? Dust from welding, torch cutting, metal oxides, slags, and silicates are all possible pollutants. Those sorts of contaminants are better moderated on land. Why can't the company be helped to move its operation elsewhere? The United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has stated that the decisions we make today are the most important in our history. Land use decisions need to be looked at far more carefully than we have in the past. This means that governing bodies, such as the CVRD, need to be prepared to make tough decisions. The land at the end of the causeway and the old deep-sea dock are deteriorating. Piles of materials are stacked helter-skelter, where the stacks of lumber used to be made ready for the ships. Crumbling asphalt and creosote logs are strewn about. It does look like a junk pile. I wonder what will happen in the future. Already in the high winter tides, the sea level is close to the roadway. What happens in 2030 to 50 when, by your own calculations, sea level rises 0.5 meter? Is Pacific Marine thinking forward to the next generations? I think it's time to reimagine the future of the Cowichan Estuary to a use that is more suitable to its extraordinary location. We could find a better place for steel manufacturing, clean up the causeway and transform it into a marine park, the kind of park that can connect with the thriving community of Cowichan Bay.
You have about 20 seconds to wrap up.
I have just 3 sentences. Plans for this idea are already underway. I would guess that if our community did this, many new jobs would be created. But more importantly, we would create space for the estuary to do her magic in creating more abundant life. Most of our oxygen comes from the oceans, and healthy estuaries give life to thousands of life forms. We won't even know the potential for shellfish, oysters, eelgrass, and smolts until we collectively do our best to let the estuary thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Peter Schuyler. I'm representing Circa. I'm one member of 150, sort of say. And I just have a few questions. Question number one. Why is the Environmental Service Department of the CVID not included in the rezoning process, since their mandate include environmental risk assessment, hazard analysis, such as flooding, as a result of climate change? They are also requested to develop strategies, adaptation, and response to impact of climate change, such as flooding. In this capacity, they have identified the high risk of imminent flooding affecting the terminal. Their mandate also includes protection of environmental resources, such as CVID ecosystem, and species at risk as identified by the OCP for the estuary surrounding the terminal. Question number two. Why is there no technical person of the CVID Environmental Service Department allowed to represent the CVID on the Cowichan Estuary Environmental Management Committee instead of politicians and city planners as CVID delegates with poor knowledge of technical environmental issues? These are my questions. Myself, as a 42-year resident and former business owner, I'm totally dismayed about the process this issue has been evolving. Lies and favoritism seems to be on the forefront. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to provide input to the committee or to the board?
Good evening. Thank you for all your hard work on the rezoning application for Weston Stevedoring Tidal Harmony Holdings. I'm here tonight to just provide some context with respect to the application and the measures that Weston Stevedoring has implemented with respect to environmental management, and that we believe, based on input back from the referral agencies, that we've provided the required information in order for the province to support our application and to move it forward to the board. First, I'd like to emphasize that the current operations, which have essentially been ongoing for more than 2 decades, have been scrutinized by a number of entities, including the Cowichan Estuary Management Committee, which is chaired by the Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resources.
She has the floor. She's allowed to speak. This is public input.
Is that deducted from my time, Chair?
Continue.
As part of this process, we've provided agencies with information that they've required, and we've been more than cooperative in working with all the agencies and providing information. Consequently, we've been collaborating with the Cowichan Tribes, and Chief Seymour wrote a letter dated March 15th last year indicating that Cowichan Tribes are not opposed to the rezoning application, noting that tribes have been included in the terminal in their land selection for treaty settlement negotiations. It is our understanding that Cowichan Tribes has an interest in participating in the economic opportunities contemplated in the rezoning application before you. In July, the Cowichan Estuary Management Committee concluded that the proposed rezoning is consistent with the province's Cowichan Estuary Management Plan, including the area designation for the terminal area. It would be, and what they stated is it would be of no significant environmental impact. According to the CVRD, it is now authorised as part of under the ordering council to proceed with the rezoning application of the Cowichan Bay Terminal. Secondly, I'd like to draw your attention to the Cowichan River Habitat Status Report that was prepared for DFO in 2010, which points out that over the last 40 years, the estuary has slowly been gradually recovering in the Cowichan Bay. And as a result of the number of efforts, including the Cowichan Estuary Management Plan and efforts by the Pacific Estuary Conservation Programme to acquire land for conservation purposes. There are currently a variety of habitat restoration projects underway in collaboration with Cowichan tribes, Tidal Harmony Holdings, Western Stevedoring, Pacific Industrial Marine, and Western Forest Products. These projects include transplanting eelgrass and re-establishing a channel, creating swales, breaching dikes to restore natural flow patterns to encourage habitat, and the building of a bridge to the terminal to allow the establishment of water flows from each side.
You've got 20 seconds.
Okay, and in conclusion, I would, moving this application forward is supported by the CVRD staff report, the Electoral Area Services Committee, the Cowichan Estuary Management Committee, and conforms with the Area D OCP. It would also be help to support well-paying jobs for 80 families in the Cowichan Valley, which currently depend on the economic activities taking place on the terminal. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration.
We have time for one more if there's another individual who'd like to provide input to the committee or to the board.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your effort tonight on this. I'm Alan Moore. I'm with Western Stevedoring. I'm the manager of the operation in Cowichan Bay. We have been down there in Cowichan Bay since the early 70s without incident. Our subtenant, current subtenant, Pacific Industrial Marine, is a solid partner in the estuary. He's recently retrieved numerous boats from sinking. I don't know of anyone else around here that's going to race down there and get those boats out of there. And without Pacific Industrial Marine there, those boats would have sunk and there would have been potential damage to the estuary. So they're a very, very good partner in the estuary. And as I said, four boats again last week. A few months ago, there was a couple more. And then last year, we removed 7 abandoned boats at our cost of over $30,000 to get those boats out of the estuary. I don't know of any local environmental group that's going to take that on. Pacific Industrial Marine have really stepped up to protect the bay, and they're financial partners in restoring the eelgrass. And basically, I'm going to wrap this up, but I'm concerned about the constant mention that it's heavy industry down there. We're not looking for heavy industry. We're just looking to rezone what's currently being done down there, and it is not heavy industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and that concludes our public input period. And next we go to committee commission reports. CR1, Director Yanni Denar. Oh, pardon me. You're right. Thank you. Skipped right over that. Today we are fortunate to have with us Chief William Seymour and David Slade from the Cowichan Watershed Society, and they are coming before us today to give us an overview of their society funding and benefits. My apologies and welcome.
Not the first time, Ian.
Likely won't be the last.
Siem na siya. Siem na olmoch. Uitzap ka siem. Teniet na lekker tonight squalwant in the Hunan. Good evening, everybody. I just want to thank everyone for the good feelings and allowing us on the agenda. I think this is something that has been lacking since the Watershed Board had been created is to come back to this table and present on what we're doing and how your funding is being dispersed. So I think you can look at this as a first of an annual report. I want to talk about, before David comes up with his budgets and that, I just want to look at the partnerships and the value that we have in that. You know, we look at stories and teachings of our elders and how we're always taught to look after the land, the resources that are here, and the struggles over the years of fighting government to try and see things our way. When the discussions for the Watershed Board started, and Cowichan Tribes decided that we need to sit on this board to ensure that what's going on in our traditional territory is going to be looked after and carried on. When you look over the past 8 years that we've been meeting together, and I look at a real partnership that has started, the discussions and open discussions and how we can work together and help each other out. So when I look at, we're concerned about our territory, and now our concern is for everybody in the Cowichan Valley. So once again, thank you for your support. Heitsapka.
Thank you, Chief Seymour, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and elected board members and members of the staff of the CVRD. I know you've had a long day, and I'm going to try and cover a fair bit of watershed, so I'm going to move quickly. But before I talk to you about the Watershed Board, I would just like to talk to you briefly about myself. I was born and raised in the Cowichan Valley, and while I've traveled widely, I've never called any other place my home. I've been part of the family-owned water well drilling business, Drillwell Enterprises, for 35 of its almost 55 years of operations in the Cowichan Valley, and I am in the process of handing the business off to the third generation of well drilling slades. We have drilled thousands of wells in the Cowichan Valley, and there's about a 90% chance if you're drinking groundwater, you're drinking it from a well that we drilled, including the water that's in your glasses here today. We currently employ about 30 people and have annual payroll of close to $2 million. I have lived through hard times in business when the only way we were able to pay our staff was to not pay ourselves. For most of my business and personal life, I have lived by the motto that if you can't pay cash, you probably should be looking for something cheaper. So I understand and appreciate fiscal responsibility. I am responsible for the $700,000 budget for the Mill Bay Fire Department in Area A. I pay property taxes in Area B, C, E, Duncan, and Lake Cowichan, and I serve on the APC in Area C. So I know what property taxes are about, and while I believe they are a necessary evil, I don't like to pay them or see them go up without tangible benefits. My reason for being here today is to tell you briefly about the Cowichan Watershed Board Society, and they are sort of the same thing, but the society is the financial wing of the Watershed Board, and some of the tangible benefits that it brings to the Cowichan region. The Cowichan Watershed Board is made up of 14 members, some elected and appointed via regional government, some elected and appointed by Cowichan Tribes, and the remaining selected and nominated from various disciplines and backgrounds to bring special skills and experience to the table. Created in 2010 in response to repeated droughts and other concerns, the Watershed Board was considered the best way to address a range of issues raised in the 2007 Cowichan Basin Water Management Plan. In short, the Cowichan watershed was seen to be dying a death of 1,000 cuts, if you'll pardon the cliche. The board has no official power, but has shown that even with limited financial resources, the power of persuasion can be a very powerful tool. And since its inception, it has become a trusted source for information and a voice to rally support and attention to issues of importance. Since 2010, the Cowichan Watershed Board has been co-chaired and co-funded by the CVRD and Cowichan Tribes. If you refer to the budget provided, you will see that the CVRD contributes $50,000 in operation funds. For that contribution, the community gets substantial benefits. If you look at the core budget that was provided, you will see the salaries, the insurance, the office supplies, which provide the monthly meetings, the time to manage 5 target working groups and an outstanding technical advisory committee, the VIU speaker series, the river cleanup, etc., all of which are great benefits. But to see the bigger picture, you need to look at the fund program summary also provided. If you care to do the math, you will see that the current and multi-year grants under Cowichan Watershed Society management is just shy of $500,000. If you were to drill deeper, as drillers like to do, you would find that in real dollars spent right here in the Cowichan Valley, that $50,000 annual investment by the CVRD leverages between $200,000 and $250,000 per year, a return on investment of 4 or 5 to 1. Further, administration of the many grants is paid for from grant dollars, not from the core funding. I would like to point out at this time the 2 outstanding people that are the Cowichan Watershed Board's part-time employees, and I use the term part-time very loosely. Tom Rutherford, a sort of retired DFO manager and fisheries biologist, is our executive director with the Cowichan Watershed Board, and Jill Thompson is our administrator and project manager. These 2 dedicated individuals provide all of their own computers, phones, office space, filing, local transportation. They get no pensions or benefits and are frequently still working on meetings, minutes, presentations, grant applications, and reports late into the evenings and on weekends. If you want the really big picture, you would have to go to the greater community and see the reduction in bovine and human fecal coliform in local waters due in part to water quality sampling programs funded through the Watershed Board, which provided encouragement to 12 South End dairy farms to sign on to a group environmental farm plan to improve nutrient management. We're currently hoping to bring forward a water management plan, and there's possible funding pending for that. You would need to see the results and the dedication of the hundreds of people who turn out each year to clean the lake, river, and estuary and haul tons of garbage and recycling, and the rebounding salmon returns likely assisted by improved habitat and extensive sediment control at Stoltz Bluff. You would have to see the snow pillow on Heather Mountain that improves our ability to determine how much water will be expected to flow to the lake and river system from snowmelt. You would have to see the reduction in water use throughout the region based in part on our Water Conservation Challenge, our Water Superheroes, outreach, and combined harmonized efforts of the CVRD and most other water utilities in the region, resulting in a reduction across the board, and a rebound in aquifers in Cobble Hill. In talking to Graham Kissick of Catalyst Paper since 2010, and after several meetings and visits from the Cowichan Watershed Board, they have reduced their water consumption by 21% and are currently using slightly more than half of what their annual allowable water license allows. You would have to see the thousands of hours donated by hundreds of volunteers from lake to estuary and the tens of thousands of dollars in donated equipment, food, gifts, and venues that knit the stewardship and business communities together and help provide the safe, secure, and sustainable water resources needed for our personal, environmental, and economic well-being. My final point, and perhaps the most important success of the Cowichan Watershed Board, is the partnership that has been created between Cowichan tribes and the CVRD. The combined strengths and capacity that are brought forward by the First Nations and local government in the form of the Cowichan Watershed Board are respected and envied across Canada. Without this partnership, there is no doubt that few of our grant applications would be successful, and little doubt that grant applications by the CVRD and Cowichan tribes are viewed more favorably because of this mutually respectful and supportive relationship. It gives me great satisfaction to believe that I, in partnership with you, am a small part of local reconciliation and action. I believe that all of us share the same goals of having happy, healthy, and prosperous communities where our children and grandchildren can live, work, and play in a safe, peaceful, and sustainable Cowichan region. And I believe that the partnership created by the Cowichan Watershed Board between Cowichan tribes and the CVRD is vital to creating that affordable and sustainable future that we all want. I believe that it would not be possible for any government entity to build the level of trust, respect, support, and community participation that has been created with the Cowichan Watershed Board. In short, I respectfully suggest that this is the best bang you are going to get for your watershed bucks. And I hope you will agree. So, thank you. Questions? Tom and Jill are the brains of this operation, and Chief Seymour. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Does the board have, any board members have questions for our delegation? Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank them for coming tonight, and I have been a member for a long time and doing a lot of work in the estuary, so I liked when David said live, work, and play. That is something that is in our official community plan as well. So I'd just like to thank you all for coming and to reminding us of what we're doing and how we're caring for our community. Thank you.
Anyone else? Director Marsh.
Yes, just further to what Director Yanni Darnito said, I think that there's so many groups, and you guys are one of the top ones in Cowichan, who managed to catalyze the hearts and souls and minds and bodies of so many people and bring us together as a region. And I think that, you know, we can never quantify would that have been happening without all these groups when we've had these storms. But I think it's clear that it helps in the relationships that are built. And my 1 year that I was able to come help with the river cleanup I was really quite blown away by the variety and diversity of the people and the ages who came to help. So thank you so much for all of your dedicated time, and to think that 2 staff members were able to leverage not only the money you said, 4 to 5 times the grant, but, you know, hundreds and hundreds of bodies. It's pretty incredible. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Director March. Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much for reporting to us today. I appreciate you coming, and again, thank you. Next on the agenda, I believe we have Dr. Bruce Fraser, Shawnigan Basin Society Milfoil Management.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we can pop that up later. This is a report of the discovery of a recent technology that may in fact provide something of a breakthrough in milfoil management. Some of the information I'll be imparting briefly is as recent as learned from some of the proprietors of a business last evening. So this is fairly hot off the press. And as you know, milfoil has been a growing problem in Shawnigan Lake and is now universal around the growable foreshore, occupying most of the available habitat. It's a permanent fixture with growing consequences to water, recreation, lake safety, and it's symptomatic of a suite of favorable environmental conditions that are not likely to go away. There's a bit of a background story to something like milfoil, and that's the story of vectors. I think we're all familiar with stories of the malaria parasite, or of dengue fever, or African sleeping sickness, or the Zika virus, or the West Nile virus. Those disease-causing organisms are carried by biting insects, mainly mosquitoes and flies, and the carriers collectively are known as transmission vectors. Milfoil, too, has a vector. It's us. It's humans are the main carriers of milfoil amongst the water bodies, on boats, trailers, dumped from aquariums, and so on. And we, as it happens, go well beyond merely being a transmission vector. We also create the siltation and nutrient accumulation conditions that favor the explosive growth of the milfoil once it's been introduced to a lake. We are also in the process of creating the emerging climate conditions that will favor its continued success. So we have a formidable opponent in milfoil, and we have a formidable opponent in ourselves as the major vector of milfoil. So what I wanted to bring out tonight was a number of control methods, because we discovered one that is a potential game changer. There's now a long worldwide history of attempts to control milfoil once it's been established. They include attacking the organism directly, modifying the organism's environment, employing predators, and attacking the vectors that carry milfoil around. So inclusion of that includes something like restricting milfoil introduction to lakes, And the main method of that has been promoting the washing of boats and the washing of trailers and educating people to take care with the potential of moving fragments of live milfoil from lake to lake. Not been very effective, mainly due to lack of monitoring and enforcement of compliance and the absence of facilities at launching areas to actually wash boats. So mostly it doesn't get done. The next more drastic step is poisoning with herbicides, which is effective in small ponds, but obviously not appropriate for a drinking water source or a major fish-bearing lake where they could also be impacted. Then there's a whole suite of biological controls. Milfoil weevils have been deployed with limited success. Our own local crayfish are said to be natural predators of milfoil, but they in turn have been depleted by predation from our introduced smallmouth bass. Weed eating is another major one, where mowing milfoil plants by water-based machinery and disposing of the detritus on land. It's effective in dealing with appearance in suitable shore areas, but very expensive and must be continued indefinitely. It has the potential also to expand milfoil through escaped fragments that are created by the mowing process. It's a problem well known in the Okanagan Basin system, for instance. Another is rototilling, using an underwater rototiller to dig up the plants from the bottom and doing that in winter so that any fragments that are created die in the cold water and don't proliferate. This is also a continuous commitment, expensive, based upon a raft of machinery, and suitable only where shoreline conditions allow the use of that kind of mechanization, again, with a lot of experience in the Okanagan Basin. The next is divers, using divers, scuba divers, to hand-pick individual plants, pull them up by the roots, and place them in mesh bags to limit the escape of fragments so you aren't simply dispersing the plant. It's effective, but it's extremely expensive. It's physically dangerous for the divers and requires ongoing annual efforts. And it's being practiced, for instance, in the Christina Lake system, but the cost of that is $300,000 a year, raised from a single electoral area. So the limitations on existing methods that are available are suction dredging is another one, where the use of modified gold dredges to uproot milfoil plants, including roots, and piping them into large mesh bags is something we talked about at a previous meeting that's also being experimentally tried in certain areas of Shawnigan Lake. Another simpler and less costly one is shading with plastic sheeting over the surface of the bottom. It cuts off the lice necessary for photosynthesis and requires being placed in the spring and removed a little later in the year so that you aren't also killing off native plants which you want to proliferate after milfoil has been. It is effective, but it's limited in application to very small local areas and needs annual applications and the handling of large amounts of plastic waste, which are, of course, part of the bargain. So there are a lot of limitations in these methods. Labor intensity, operational safety, the cost of ongoing repetition, restricted location suitability, ecological side effects, and the dangers of introducing other species controls, and ultimately, of course, limited effectiveness for controlling milfoil. So by accident of communications, we discovered a new technology in the nanotechnology field that's being applied to water bodies in the United States, in Dubai, in India, in Japan, in various parts of the world, using oxygen nanobubble creating machines that help to oxygenize the water. So what it does is it uses a water pump attached to an oxygen nanobubble creating machine. The unit scavenges oxygen out of the water, out of the air, eliminates the nitrogen that can feed algae and cyanobacteria. So the nanobubbles of oxygen introduced in the water are so small that they remain suspended in the water and do not escape like you see the exudate arising from the usual pump aerators. And therefore it is available for an extended duration in the water body. The system is remarkably inexpensive, it's parsimonious of energy, capable of being mounted on a shoreline or dock, and can be used virtually anywhere. Installation is so straightforward, it can be handled by a local landowner without any specialized expertise. So the technology started out being used in the US initially to deal with algal problems, but has been recently found to kill milfoil plants. And it's a technology, for instance, that is under contract now by the agents that we've been dealing with for dealing with algal problems in Beaver Lake in the Capital Regional District. So there are a couple of recent examples in our own area that are quite remarkable. A 2-week application of the nanobubble technology in Lake Ida Ann and Langford killed the milfoil plants. They died, floated to the surface where they could be easily mechanically collected for transport to composting facilities. And there's a report from Langford that details this. A similar success was achieved after 1-week application in Spider Lake at the Spider Lake Springs Resort north of Qualicum. How it works is that it appears to affect nutrient available uptake from the milfoil roots from lake sediments, and also may limit the availability of carbon dioxide that is placed from the highly oxygenated lake water, thus effectively starving the plants at a critical growth period. I think both of those explanations are in the theory category at the moment, but that's one of the things that we like to determine. Now, the partners behind this are quite a remarkable crew. The nanobubble system is a patented technology created by a BC company called Gaia Water Limited, located in Victoria, and further partnered with a major firm called Gaia USA. Gaia USA, in turn, has licensed it to Homeport Water Solutions, a large U.S. company that tested a whole variety of competing aeration systems and found that the Gaia model to be the most effective and cost-efficient. No chemicals, low power consumption, high reliability, and low visual impact. Homeport then went on to develop the physical units, including using components developed in the southern U.S., and provided them further to the largest lake remediation company in the U.S. called Solitude Lake Management, and their operating systems are ISO and EPA certified in the U.S. So Gaia, Homeport, and Solitude have expressed an interest in working with the Basin Society to conduct scientific field trials of the technology in Shawnigan Lake in 2019. They are working with us to develop the trial methodology and are willing to supply instruments to us initially at a discounted cost. So the Society is in the process of setting up a series of public meetings in Shawnigan, January 23rd, February 20th, and March 20th, each at 7 p.m. in our village office, to discuss the field trial process, the locations to be used, the funding, with the community prior to commencement in April, which would be the critical growth period. In the meantime, the Society is working on a federal eco-action grant to expand the trial effort beyond the smaller means available through the SBS annual budget, which in 2019 can extend probably to 1 or 2 units.
Bruce, you got about a minute?
Okay, I can do that. Other partners in the process from whom written commitments have been received to date include Timber West, who actually owns the land on which the milfoil is growing, Department of Fisheries Oceans, which is concerned with the health of the lake from fisheries, CRD Environment, which is launching, of course, its major watershed health function, Mill Bay and District Conservation Society, which is responsible for the annual introduction of coho stocks to the Shawnigan system as a backup to the Gold Stream and other locally threatened fish stocks. Engagement is actively being sought from a variety of others, the Shawnigan Research Group being one of them, who've been invited to participate in the design and technical assessments. We have early opportunities, I think, to discuss this with Cowichan Tribes and the Malahat First Nation. The Ministry of Environment and Flenro are being sought for regulatory approvals, and we are dealing with the Invasive Species Council of BC and the Coast Invasive Species Committee. So the discovery of all of this was really found by one of our local advocates, Bill Savage, whom you're familiar with. It was an accidental contact that got us into this arena, and all of the detailed work of contact with the partners and the solicitation of letters and grants, proposals, and so forth is being done by the Society's Executive Director, Kelly Musselwhite. So that's a very brief report, but it's a breakthrough that may be of interest to other lake-owning populations around the region and certainly around the province. And there's a lot of significance in a nanotechnology breakthrough that may in fact work.
Great, thank you very much. And can I ask if I've got a couple that would like to ask questions of you, so will you take a couple of questions? Director Seaborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Fraser. I can't help but get a little bit excited when I hear this, but I need to ask a question because I'm not a biologist. Does this technology also apply to what we call blue-green algae in Quamachin Lake? Is that the same as milfoil?
It was really developed to deal with algal problems, which is why it's been commissioned by the CRD for Beaver Lake in the CRD. We asked them about that because of the obvious concerns for Quamachin Lake. And they have not really tried this in large lake conditions. And so they are very interested to see whether the application will work in nutrient-poor lakes like Shawnigan and in areas that are more heavily infested. It's not known, for instance, at this time whether it would have similar effects with parrot feather, but there's a lot of investigative potential there.
That's another issue that we deal with.
Exactly. Okay. So one of the things we'd be happy to do is come to North Cowichan discussion with either your staff or your board to talk about in greater detail, because there's much more detail that we can convey in 10 minutes.
Love to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director McGonigal.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Fraser. And I'm hoping after the trial period that you'll return to the board and give us the results of those trials. And from there, hopefully some good news.
Yeah. I don't know whether there's any current Cowichan lake infestations. Are you aware of any?
I believe there is some right at the weir.
Right.
So it's
one of the way the application work is that the nanobubbling machine will cover a fairly large extent of area of water, very inexpensively, and it may be a kind of technology that could be used for a spot application where a new infestation has occurred, and to knock it down very quickly early, which is better than having to deal with a fully infested lake. So that may be something we'd like to discuss with our partners as well.
Director Wilson.
Thank you, Dr. Fraser. That was really interesting stuff. Is there a maximum depth at which this plant stops growing, or is it all the way down to any depth at all?
No, it's based upon the relatively shallow littoral zone along the edge because it needs the light for photosynthesis. So it's a limited area like a fringe around the lake. Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone else? Seeing none, thank you very much, Bruce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Appreciate you coming. Now, make sure I don't miss anyone else. Down to number 9, Committee Commission Reports. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The report and recommendation of Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of December 19th, 2018. Recommendations 1 through 4. Number 1, that a grant and aid Electoral Area B, Shawnigan Lake, in the amount of $1,000 be provided to the CMS Food Bank Society to support the food bank services. 2.1, the one streetlight be installed on BC Hydro pole located at 1045 Bourbon Road in Cary Village, Strata, Mill Bay, as part of Mill Bay Malahat Critical Street Lighting Service Area. 2, the operational costs associated with funding this streetlight be reflected in the 2020 budget for Function 557. 3.1, the certification of sufficiency confirming that a sufficient petition requesting inclusion into the Shawnigan Beach Estate Sewer System Service Area be received. 2, that the CVRD bylaw 1910 Shawnigan Beach Estate Sewer Water System Service Establishment bylaw 2000 be amended to include the property described as PID 002483858, and that 3, the inclusion be approved by the policy 21-2 of the South Cowichan Official Community Plan. Number 4.1, Shawnigan Lake Water Conservation Plan attached to the Water Management Division's November 29th, 2018 staff report be approved. 2, the Woodley Range Water Conservation Plan attached to the Water Management Division's November 29th, 2018 staff report be approved. 3, that the Missachi Lake Water Conservation Plan attached to the Water Management Division November 29th, 2018 staff report be approved. And that 4, the Honeymoon Bay Water Conservation Plan attached to the Water Management Division November 29th staff report be approved. And those are the first 4.
You move those?
Yes.
Seconded by Director McGonigal. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed. That motion carries.
Electoral area directors only vote on the following under Part 14, Planning and Land Use Management of the Local Government Act.
Hold on just a moment, Director Yanni DiNardo. You'd like 5 dealt with separately?
Pulling number 5, so it's number 6. 6.1, the zoning amendment bylaw for application number RZ18CO2, 3625 Cobble Hill Road be forwarded to the board for consideration of the first and second reading. And number 2, the public hearing be scheduled with directors from areas A, B, and C as delegates.
Move that item.
So moved.
Seconded by Director Wilson. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. And 5.1, please.
5.1, the zoning amendment bylaw for application number 3D16RS, Title Harmony Holdings Limited, Cowichan Bay Causeway, be drafted and forwarded to the board for consideration of first and second reading. And number 2, that a public hearing be scheduled with directors from all 9 electoral areas as delegates. I move that.
Seconded by Director Marcotte. Director Acton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that I really appreciate the analogy that the woman had about changing Powell River from industrial use to lighter industrial use, or just, Campbell River, sorry. Campbell River. That's my East Van coming out here. But yeah, and I can really appreciate that. And so for me, I'm going to vote against this because I would like to see an environmental assessment done on this, on the estuary, so that we could remove the political side of this and actually have, use a proper lens of how we, so that we can have a baseline and that also we can be moving forward instead of backwards. And I appreciate her analogy, and I truly believe that I don't feel like we're moving forward with this decision.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Yes, I have similar concerns to Director Acton. So this application is about a request to expand the industrial use of the estuary to accommodate marine manufacturing. Marine manufacturing has significant pollution risks related to steel fabrication. The proposed expansion is for a business that has been operating in this area without approval for over 20 years. So estuaries are really complex ecological systems. They're the nurseries of the sea, an extremely precious ecological asset. The Cowichan estuary is ranked right near the top of BC's most productive estuaries. In fact, it is so important, it has a plan with the force of the law behind it. An OIC put in place in 1986 to stop the industrial degradation of the estuary. This application came forward without a science-based environmental assessment that establishes whether the rezoning will or will not have a significant detrimental environmental impact upon the estuary. I am opposed to this recommendation because it moves the application process to the public hearing stage. At that stage, the public should be provided with solid information about the level of environmental risk to the health of the estuary so that they can provide informed input about whether the economic benefits to the community warrant that risk. Without a science-based environmental assessment that establishes the current condition and the potential future impacts, a public hearing will be an exercise in uninformed opinion. I am also extremely disturbed that the province, who oversees the OIC plan, has abrogated its responsibility to ensure a sound technical assessment of whether or not the environmental impacts are acceptable. So I would like to make a referral motion whenever that's appropriate.
I'm going to go to the next speaker, and then I will come back to you. Director Yanni DiNardo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, I turned it off. Was already on. This has been really contentious in our community, but what hasn't been contentious is all the years that we have worked, and I personally have worked very hard in the estuary. Eelgrass protection, working with the Cowichan Watershed Board on water quality, sewer with the float homes, and honoring our OCP. The community has said, and it is on our OCP, that they would like to have this as a working community. If I felt that getting this with their marine zoning that they already have was to add the bridge building, which makes a lot of sense to have the bridge building that doesn't have to be barged on roads or land that is on sea. If I felt that it was contaminating or disturbing our estuary, I would be the first person to be protesting. I don't feel that this has. It has gone through major scrutiny for a very long time. This application is 2.5 years long. And the water is, like I had said, is the best place for it. This is only bridge building. We've got it with some people acting like this is the Love Canal, that is polluting everything and we want it back the way it was. Well, it's already been disturbed. So I don't feel that we have to hold this off any longer for these applicants. And I really feel the community has already stated that as well. So the live, work, and play that I already reiterated with the Cowichan Watershed Board is something that our community definitely has said as well that they would like to have. That includes the fishermen, the Fisherman's Wharf, and that includes this piece of property as well that is now being even breached with the two breaches and they've been working together with other community members. They were working really well. And besides that, with the destruction with the derelict vessels, and we did have somebody speak to that. If we didn't have them in the community working for us and taking out these vessels, it would have been really, really challenging. And that would have been a whole lot of problem in the bay. As well as working partners with the Wooden Boat Society. When anything needs to be done, they're a community partner in bridge building, not only in bridge building, but working with the community. And I could list off many things that they've worked in partnership with building the wharf at the Wooden Boat Society. So I really feel that this has been completely blown out of proportion, and having this rezoning has been really a shame because it should have just been an amendment because it was just the bridge building, which they already have their industrial zoning. So when we say heavy industrial, these are the bridges that we are using. These are the ramps that we're using in our parks and CVRD parks, which actually bring so that they don't shade the environment. So asking them to do an environmental study on something that is as limited as this, I think is ridiculous. So I will obviously be supporting asking the public what their say for this is. So taking this to a public hearing is the next step, and we ask the public to speak, and then we make the decision. Thank you.
Director Nicholson.
I'd like to move to refer the application back to staff until an environmental assessment is completed by the applicant that provides information on past impacts and potential future environmental impacts of a marine manufacturing facility on the ecological assets of the Cowichan Estuary, including Chinook salmon, killer whales, international water bird populations, and clam beds.
Is there a seconder? We have a seconder. It's a referral motion. Electoral area directors only. Call the question. All those in favor of the referral motion? And those opposed? Those opposed, Director Marcotte, Yanni DiNardo, Wilson, Kuhn, and Morrison. Director Marsh? It's defeated.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There's a motion on the floor.
So I can't speak because I'm not
You
electoral
can
area director?
speak to it, but it will be voting by electoral area directors.
Right, what is the motion then?
The motion is
Mr.
what was read
what's
out
here,
by the
yeah.
director. keeping in mind that
So I
this
have a
is-
question. Keeping in mind, sorry, what?
This has been gone through the Electoral Area Services Committee for
No,
discussion.
no, I understand that. Given that the whole region voted for the watershed protection function, and we're all concerned about the water, and, you know, a lot of what we said about watersheds and the water is they don't stop at political boundaries. And given that many of North Cowichan taxpayers and Ladysmith and Duncan taxpayers are going to be funding that function, and the Cowichan River flows through those, including Lake Cowichan and many area direct, I just don't understand why we wouldn't make sure there's a proper environmental assessment. If it has been done, I would certainly like to see it. I feel uneasy about this. I know that it's contentious in Cowichan Bay. I was very moved by what Ms. Spahn said about what happened in Campbell River. And I don't know the history, and this is one of the challenges of the Cowichan Valley Regional District. So the Electoral Area Services people do their thing, and we are only allowed to do some things, but there are ecological assets that we all share. The estuary, the river flows through the estuary, and it starts way out in, out in, I don't even know where. But I don't know why we wouldn't have ask that kind of ecological assessment, because I suspect, what I'm getting is that this business has never done that. So we don't know what the impacts are. Is that correct? That they've been here without proper zoning for 20 years and we don't know what the impacts are, if any? Am I wrong?
I think the way you've characterized it isn't completely accurate. I think you've got a business that's been in operation for a number of years. The specific aspect of the business that rezoning has come forward for has not been a permitted use within the zoning. So that's what Director Yanni DiNardo would refer to as a technical or text amendment as opposed to a rezoning with the changes. So that's
So
more to
then
the
there's going to
extent
be
of
no
this.
other thing happening?
No.
So my question then again is, do we know that what the impact of what's presently happening is?
I'm going to turn to Mr. Blackwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a difficult question to answer. So I can speak specifically from a staff perspective. This is a land use matter, and staff did not feel, given the scope and extent of uses currently permitted on the site, that there'd be any material change. So on that basis, staff did not feel that any additional supporting material was necessary for planning staff to make what I would consider a thoughtful decision on the matter, particularly given the other vetting processes that were involved. Staff also felt that there was a benefit by removal of the provision for bulk fuel storage, which it felt on balance was also positive. That said, I understand that the applicant has undertaken some degree of environmental assessment on the site. I can't speak to it. I don't recall the details. But that they are not entirely in the dark with that either. So just to reiterate, from a planning and land use perspective, there's no substantive shift in the scope and extent of land use permitted. It's a different iteration of a similar kind of land use. And so on that basis, no further assessment was deemed appropriate or necessary.
Thank you. Follow up?
Yeah, I just wonder, given what we've learned in the last 2 decades about climate change and sea level rise, if we'd known this then and we were looking through that lens then, would we be allowing this? And without an assessment, I don't see how we would know that. And so I know I don't get to vote, but I have a lot of alarm bells about this. It doesn't feel like, it just feels like that I would love it if my colleagues would, I think it would be best if you're going to go to the public to have what Director Nicholson is saying is some kind of a technical, we're not talking about land use merely, we're talking about potentially polluting a bay. And I don't think that it's really a great idea to go to a public hearing without the facts, because there will be people. If I'm just hearing about it now and I've been around this table and it's making me feel like this, I'm sure that it'll be a very contentious public hearing. So I would think if the applicant is confident that they would, I don't know, that information should at least be out there, if they're confident that it's not polluting.
Thank you. Director Kuhn?
Yes, I have two comments. The first one is in response to Director Marsh's comment that municipalities should have input. This plays the other way as well. Municipalities do take actions that we area directors have no input into. So that argument doesn't hold any water. The other point I'd like to make is we're almost getting into a situation now where we're declaring the company guilty unless they prove themselves innocent. And that's the other way around. The company has been in existence there for what, 20 years or whatever. We haven't had any calamity. We environmentally, they have proven to be an asset to the area. And now we're some of us are thinking, well, we can't trust them. We need an environmental report, and we need this, we need this. It's almost like we're accusing them that they're polluting or whatever when we have absolutely no proof and there has been no indication. So I can't see a reason for doing that.
Director Yanni DiNardo?
Also like to comment to Director Marsh that the sea level rise, that means the village will go too. So the sea level rise, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in our village as well. So that is just something that we can't help in this land use application. And they've done a lot of work. And, you know, I just don't know how much more the province is the one that's already given us their information.
Director Nicholson?
I hope people didn't misunderstand my comments. I have no quarrel with the current company that's using that facility. This is not about zoning or use for a business. It's about a land use business. So they could be gone tomorrow and a completely different company in place. So this is about a long-term decision about land use. And yes, I am very concerned about climate change. It seems very bizarre that we're spending so much time fighting these little individual battles when, as Director Yanni DiNardo says, the whole of the village will be underwater soon. So, you know, you have to plan ahead for these kind of things, and those are the big issues that we ought to be talking about at this table.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, I'm going to call the question. Everyone's clear on the resolution? Mr. Barry, would you please repeat the resolution that we're about to
Absolutely.
vote on?
Mr. Chair, there's two parts. That is zoning amendment bylaw for application number 3D16RS, title Harmony Holdings Limited, Cowichan Bay Causeway, be drafted and forwarded to the board for consideration of first and second reading. And that a public hearing be scheduled with the directors from all 9 electoral areas as delegates.
I will call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? Director Salmon, Director Nicholson, Director Acton opposed. That motion carries. Thank you. Next item, number 11, staff reports.
Yes,
and Mr. Barry.
Yes, Mr. Chair. 2 staff reports. The first one from the Development Services Division regarding an application an OCP amendment rezoning application for Couverton Real Estate Timber West Forest Company. And the recommendation, the properties legally described, and there's 4 legal description, PID numbers there, be included within the Honeymoon Bay Fire Service area and a CVRD drainage control area prior to consideration of adoption of official community amendment bylaw number 4256 and zoning amendment bylaw 4257.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? None opposed, the motion carries.
Second staff report from Legislative Services Division regarding the Regional Grant and Aid Service Establishment. And the recommendation, we're actually looking for direction. The previous board referred this to 2019, and this board needs to make a decision whether to proceed with the establishment of a Regional Grant and Aid Service. If you do, you need to include money in this year's budget, because the next step, if you proceed, would be to go to the public for their input on the proposal.
Director Stone.
I don't know about anybody else, but I have referendum anxiety and tiredness. I would move that we do not proceed with this establishment of this service.
Okay, I got moved. I have seconders all around the room, and I had a speakers list. So I think we'll accept that as a motion, and I will hear from those that want to speak to the motion put forward. Director Nicholson.
Yeah, I don't think the timing's right. I think if we were really interested in moving ahead with this, it would be worthwhile running through a second, another year, so that the new members can understand what the program is attempting to do. And I also think we need to think about doing a little bit of work on understanding what the benefits of getting some solid information about the benefits. And I don't think we've done it long enough that we can do that. So I'd be
Thank you.
in favor of not moving forward at this time.
Thank you. Director Acton.
That was shocking, but I would totally support that motion, because I felt that way too there was that one good thing that community green van was pretty interesting, that came out of last year's. But we spent so much time debating this, and then it becomes such a political. I like Mr. Evans' analogy of throwing the money on the floor and directors diving for it. In the past, there's been a lot of hard feelings too, so I'm really happy with that recommendation.
Director Seaberg.
I just want to be clear the implications of this motion. The implications of this motion are that we do that again this year, that we throw a bunch of money on the floor and we all scramble for it. I mean, and I guess I'm okay with that in the sense that process has served us in the past, although arguably maybe not well. I do understand that there are new people around the table who need to engage in that process once to see why some of us don't think it's the best model. Part of me, and Director Stone and I were having a discussion as we were having dinner, part of me says, why don't we just get rid of the whole grants and aid program altogether? And I know that is going to create tremendous community, but you know what, if they don't get the money from us, maybe they get it from somewhere else. If we free it up in terms of tax requisitions that we don't have to get, it allows our constituents to, rather than being forced to give the money to the CVRD, who then channel it through to some charities, they can perhaps just give it to their favorite charities themselves. I think it's an option to consider, but I'm not going to make that motion right now. All I'm saying is that we need to be clear what the implications are of the motion that's before us. That's all. Thank you.
So I've got myself on the list, Director Wilson and Nicholson as well. And I just want to make the comment that I see value in supporting some of the projects that have come forward before. I see that we're discussing this through budget. The motion's about not pursuing a service at this time. I get that. I I just feel that, well, it's a very challenging exercise to go through the potential disbursement of public tax dollars to groups. I feel that it's one of our jobs, and it's a job that's a very difficult job, and I realize that sometimes there's hurt feelings, and sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but it's part of what we've done in the past. I think this establishment of a function at this point is very premature, and maybe something we can discuss at a later date. And we still have our budget considerations to determine whether or not we're going to proceed with anything in 2019. So Director Nicholson has spoken. I'm going to go to Director Wilson, then back to Director Nicholson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll pass.
Director Nicholson, then Stone to close.
You said it all for me.
Director Stone to close.
I won't let it go that easy. I just want to be clear, that doesn't mean that we're still not having this grants and aid funds discussion.
Oh,
But
no.
just we're not going to tack on establishing another individual service and all the costs that go along with that in a difficult year. And I will back up Director Nicholson's comments. I believe there's value there at a right number, at a right time. But I just don't think that either of those, based on this report, is good for 2019.
Thank you. Mr. Barry, do we need a recap on what we are proposing to vote on?
So the motion on the floor is that the establishment of a regional grant and aid service not proceed.
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Not opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Barry.
It's time for some bylaws. And we have
Okay, is everybody paying attention?
just a few. The first bylaw, bylaw 4153, Community Parks Advisory Commission's Establishment Bylaw for first three readings.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Marcotte. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? None opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4153 for adoption.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Staples. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor and those opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4245, Arbutus Ridge Water System Management Amendment, first three readings.
Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Sebring. Any discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? None opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4245 for adoption.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Call the question. All in favor? Those opposed? None opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4246, Missachi Lake Water System Management Amendment, first three readings.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director McGonigal. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries.
And bylaw 4246 for adoption.
Moved by Director Stone, seconded by Director Marcotte. Any discussion? All those in favor and those opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4247, Shawnigan Lake North Water System Management Amendment, first three readings.
Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, those opposed, the motion carries.
And 4247 for adoption.
Moved by Director Acton, seconded by Director Staples. Any discussion? All those in favor, those opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4248, Cowichan Bay Sewer System Management Amendment, first three readings.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Kuhn. Any discussion? All those in favor, those opposed, none, the motion carries.
And 4248 for adoption.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Smith. Any discussion? All those in favor, those opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4249, Lambourne Estate Sewer System Management Amendment, first three readings.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Staples. Any discussion? All those in favor, those opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4249 for adoption.
Moved by Director Yanni DiNardo, seconded by Director Stone. Any discussion? All those in favor, those opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4250, Arbutus Ridge Sewer System Management Amendment, first three readings.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Salmon. Any discussion? All those in favor, those opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4250 for adoption.
Moved by Director Wilson, seconded by Director Yanni DiNardo. Any discussion? All those in favor, those opposed, the motion carries.
Bylaw 4251, Eagle Heights Sewer System Management Amendment, first three readings.
Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Marsh. Any discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed, the motion carries.
And 4251 for adoption.
Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Sebring. Any discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed, the motion carries.
And the next two bylaws, electoral area directors only. Bylaw 4256, Area F. This is the OCP amendment bylaw for Couverton, first two readings.
Moved by Director Nicholson, seconded by Director Acton. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Those opposed, the motion carries.
And bylaw 4257, Area F, the zoning amendment bylaw for Couverton, first two readings.
Moved by Director Kuhn, seconded by Director Acton. Any discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries.
That's
Mr.
it.
Chair, before we move on, sorry to interrupt, I just want to say good job, you got everybody in on the action there.
I tried. Next we go to question period. Is it question period?
Yes, it would be.
Are there any members of the gallery that have any questions for the chair? Wow, Megwitch, my man. Excellent. Can we have a resolution to move into closed session under the agenda items? Moved by Director Marcotte, seconded by Director Sebring. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion carries. 5 minutes.